This video is now in session, and Biden, a couple of days ago, introduced a new COVID vaccine mandate. So, this mandate would apply to all businesses with more than 100 employees. So, that has massive repercussions for the entirety of the United States. That would mean that 2/3 of Americans would be subjected to the COVID-19 mandate, to the vaccine mandate that Biden is implementing. So when it comes to COVID-19 vaccinations, is it mandatable and is it constitutional? And there's also another question. Would people actually get the vaccine if they were told to do so? Those are very questionable questions, are very good questions to ask, because for a lot of them, we don't know the answer to that. We don't know the sure answer. Currently, in America, 63% of people, around 63% of people, have at least one dose of the vaccine, and then 54% of people are fully vaccinated. So that is pretty low compared to other Western nations and compared to developed nations, which have a much higher vaccination rate compared to the United States. So that is the impetus for Biden's vaccine mandate. He originally said he was not interested in creating a mandate, but at this point, we are dealing with more rises, with stronger variants, more transmissible variants, and thus we're seeing a higher vaccination rate, but a slow vaccination rate. And the problem with that is it allows more variants to pop up, and the more cases there are, the likelier the chance a variant is created that is immune to the vaccine, that is dangerous, and is also highly transmissible, because variants are kind of like mutations. They happen out of nowhere because you're replicating the codes of DNA millions of times across hundreds of thousands of bodies. So so there is a high chance that a coding error could happen, and that creates a variant. That is how a variant pops up, and currently we have dozens of COVID-19 variants. It's because of these mistakes that happen throughout the process. So there is the potential, and at this point, it's almost starting to get to a point of when and not if there will be a variant that is highly transmissible, that is deadly, and is also not susceptible to the effects of the vaccine. There is almost likely, at this point, there will almost likely be a chance of that happening. So for the United States, their goal is to reach to that herd immunity point as quick as possible, and that means vaccinating people as much as possible. But for that, a lot of people are very unfavorable to getting a vaccine. If we look at the numbers, 84% of people who are not vaccinated say that they would not change their opinions if the vaccines had no side effects. 87% of them would not get the vaccines if their employer mandated them, and only 5% said that they would that these things would make them much more likely to change their minds. So as you can see, it's a very small percentage at this point. And if Biden wanted a vaccine mandate, he should have done one earlier. He should have done one at the peak of the pandemic, where we had the most cases, or I guess more specifically the peak of the summer 2021 wave, where we had a lot of cases and increase in vaccination rates because of people who genuinely fear for the virus in their state. That at this point was when Biden should have instituted a mandate, because that is the period when most people are most likely going to get the vaccine if they already haven't gotten one. So you can see that cases are now starting to go down, and with that, people are going to be less likely to get the vaccine, because at this point, the people who are getting the vaccine are only getting it because they think it's very necessary to do so. When cases were very high during August, we saw increased cases in unvaccinated states like Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, southern Georgia, Tennessee, and Arkansas, as well as South Carolina and Alaska. And because of that, more people started getting the vaccine in these places. The vaccination rates heightened. And you can see, if we go to a graph of the states with their vaccination rates, if we go here, you can see, first of all, that that the vaccines have been inoculated more and more throughout the days between July and September, and that coincides with the wave that occurred during that time. And if we look at states, we can see that Alabama started to shift towards a higher direction when COVID cases were increasing in the state. So as Mississippi, so as Louisiana, and so as Tennessee, Arkansas, and Alaska has not had a bump. So So it's very apparent that that COVID cases do in some ways coincide with COVID vaccinations, and that is a very dangerous thing for the United States because vaccinations should be promulgated when there are not high cases, because that is during a point where an infrastructure can be made for vaccines to be distributed, and that's exactly what Biden is doing right now. But we're in the United States. We're not in a nation like a country in Western Europe or in Africa or in Asia. We're in the United States, and in the United States, you can make a lot of arguments against vaccine mandates because, especially if it's tied to religion. Because essentially what it's saying here is that you should get the vaccine. If you don't get the vaccine, you'll face repercussions. Some of those repercussions might be you getting laid off or you having to take a test every single week. So it's, even though Biden can say it's a pressure on businesses to start mandating vaccines, it's really just an enforcement by the federal government. But is it constitutional? Precedent shows yes, that this is constitutional because we've seen cases before of vaccine mandates, but those kind of cases happen a very long time ago, at least a century ago. So it's still it's not completely known for sure whether the Supreme Court would be in favor of vaccine mandates or if they would be against vaccine mandates. If it relates to religion, it's likely that the Supreme Court would grant religious exceptions to the vaccine. If it's just getting a vaccine in general and under the vaccine mandate, that could be something that the justices may be more favorable towards, especially with precedent being on the side of Biden. But the question now is, are people actually going to get vaccinated because of this? And are there going to be any political repercussions for Biden and the Democrats? As for political repercussions, there's not much. At this point, all it does is reinforce the conservatives' argument that the Democrats are trying to be repressive or they're trying to force people to do stuff and going against freedom and liberty values. And while that is debatable as to whether that is true or not, this action by Biden reinforces that argument, but this argument has been has been argued many times at this point. So it's really just only gonna energize the conservative base rather than the moderate base in favor of the conservatives. So this is really just playing into the polarization between conservatives and liberals, but at this point, vaccines are really the only thing that has been truly effective against COVID-19. And for Biden, he can't continue with this with these COVID resurgences, because if these keep happening, then Biden's poll numbers are going to go down for the for his COVID handling. And at this point, his COVID handling is the only thing left that he has that is trending in the positive territory. If we look at every single other metric, including overall approval rating, it's in the net negative. So for Biden, he really needs to start rebounding on domestic issues. Afghanistan is still a big issue for the United States, but at this moment, Biden has to really focus on the domestic issues because those are the things most impacting, that has the greatest impact on Americans at this current moment. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.